G'day me herfortja. Welcome to another live Mind the Craic. Today I'm going to continue on with the subject of communication, and I'm going to deal with the aspect of interest in communication. So what am I talking about? Well, have you ever spoken to someone and found that what you've been saying that they're not interested in? They display some sort of indication on their face or their body language that they're bored or disinterested or irritated by what you're saying, not interested? Or have you had it the other way around, that you have experienced that you've been talking to someone and you're not interested in what they say, you want to be elsewhere or do something else, or you're irritated or angry or embarrassed for them in some way in listening to that communication? Well, this relates a little bit to what I spoke about in one of my previous videos, where we're talking about someone not being there, not being present. You're talking to them and they're clearly somewhere else, or someone's talking to you and you're completely in your mind thinking about something else. So being present has a little bit to do with interest, and if you want to look at my last video, you'll see some more information about that. But in regard to interest, there are a few more things other than being present that really require turning over so that you can understand more about having your communications being interesting and having people get interested in your communications. But more about those two words in a moment. So L. Ron Hubbard looked at interest in a number of ways. For example, one is that interest is actually an emotional state. And that is one of the things that relates to being present. And for that, I'm going to have you join me on the next video. So, emotion and interest and how they relate to communication, I'm going to take up in the next video. But for now, I'm going to go over some even more fundamental, let's say, definitions of interest. So I'm going to give you some things here from L. Ron Hubbard. So he said, a fundamental way of looking at interest is to qualify its two major divisions as interested and interesting. Interested means having one's attention on. Interesting means gaining and keeping attention. Interest is more consideration than attention, and is therefore attention with intention. Interest, therefore, could be defined as this: attention with an intention to give or attract attention. Okay, so just in that first part, we're looking at basically these two directions of interest. Interested is the giving of attention. So there is my intention to put my attention on this book, which, by the way, is The Problems of Work. And there's a chapter in there all about games, the game of life, and an aspect of being interested in things, as in the games that you want to play. So it goes over that. You might want to pick that up. So let me come back to this. So we're looking at this giving attention, interested, or receiving attention, interesting. So if something is interesting, you will give attention to it. You will be interested in that interesting thing. Don't get confused. Okay, so I'm going to move on from there. Interest does not mean happiness and joy. Interest is only absorbed attention and a desire to talk about it. Okay, so with that extra little thing there, what we're looking at is that not necessarily as just happiness and joy, though those moods or sensations could be, attached to it, but again, absorbed attention. I'm interested in that flower, so my attention is absorbed in that thing. So there's my interest. Okay. So, an extra part of that before we move on to some relationship and communication, right? And then this is from this book, just this quote. It's only one line, very short, but I want to explore it a little bit with regard to communication and how you can use it to understand some things. And the quote is, interest is mainly kindled by the unpredictable. And kindled, of course, we're looking at something that is stoked or improved, or it's encouraged by something. So how does that apply in life? Well, you certainly will hear across the news or many sort of aspects of media, social media and otherwise, that when something is unpredictable, what's going to happen next? What is such and such going to do in this situation? Here's the news, and what is the government going to do? Let's get interested, because there is unpredictability in it. There is, of course, the reporting of a story, and that is what happened, very factual and that sort of thing. But when there is that twist kind of put onto it, what is so-and-so going to do about it? Or what is this situation going to create? Putting that unpredictability in it, you can see how that last part of what I said in the previous quote, a desire to talk about it, actually comes about. So think about it in that way. Interest is mainly kindled by the unpredictable. Okay, think about that. So now we're going to move on to this aspect of communication. And again, this is from L. Ron Hubbard. And here he is referring to, I'm going to use two words, okay? So we have this communication, and if you've heard me say before in a previous video, we're talking about communication is essentially something which is sent and something which is received. So that's something we can call a particle. It's a thing. A particle could be anything from as tiny as an actual energy particle of matter, or it could be a book. We could refer to that as a particle, or a person, even voice, we can say that's a particle. That's something that's going across. Okay, so we have a point A and something is sent across, and this particle sending across to point B is received, and that is one-way communication. So when that communication is then repeated from point A back to from point B back to point A, we call this back and forth. We can call that a communication cycle, because it goes around and around in a way. You see that? Okay, so with those two words, particle and cycle, sort of cleared up there, let me give you this quote. In a communication cycle, only the subject of the communication and the way the communication particle is offered can be interesting. The terminals involved in the communication cycle are the ones that can be interested. Okay, so take that away and look at that in terms of life and your observation. All right, so here we have two people talking. This person here has something to say. The people involved in the conversation are interested in the communication particle, the thing being spoken about. Now, how many times do people get that confused with themselves being the interesting thing? Oh, look at me, I'm wearing this, and I have this bag, and I do this, and look at my lovely blahs, and all this sort of thing. That, in some ways, is the person trying to be interesting, and not the thing that they're talking about being the thing that is interesting. So, people that are being interesting, yes, they're trying to attract your attention. And if you, again, look at some previous videos, we spoke about survival and how people regard things that are surviving well, that appear to be surviving well, that they look amazing or they're this and that sort of thing, that people will want to be like them. That people will want to adopt certain ideas and things, so they're interested in what they say to that degree because they're making themselves an interesting person. But in communication, and really to get your message across, the thing that is interesting is the communication. And when you, as the provider, as the source of a communication, are yourself interested in that thing that you're communicating about, and you're expressing this attention, your intention to give attention to this and make sure that it gets across to that person, a thing which is sent and then which is received, your interest in the communication will really come across to the other person. And of course, the other person seeing that interest will start to pique their own interest, and so therefore you have more interest in the communication. So think about that when you're delivering your next communication. Okay, so the next part of that quote there was, the terminals involved in the communication cycle are the ones that can be interested. So I failed to cover this before, but terminals are the ends, the points that are fixed and don't move necessarily. So this is a terminal, a place from which things are sent and received, kind of a definition of a terminal. So the communication, again, is the thing that you should be interested in, not in necessarily the terminal or the person, because the communication is the interesting part. So think about that from the viewpoint of when you're getting communications across or when you're receiving communications. Have a look. What are people interested in? Are they interested in what they're actually talking about? Are they interested in you? Because that, you could say, is one of the exceptions of, are you interested in the person or are you interested in what they are saying? So explore those sort of separate ideas there for yourself. Turn over this idea of interest and communication in your mind and see how it applies in life. See what you can use of it to understand more of your life and your communications and those of the people around you. So in the next video, as I said, we're going to deal with interest and emotion and communication. And that's all I have time for today. Shanae for today.